All right. So, welcome everyone. We're doing this a little bit different today. We're going to be a little bit more casual for this month's webinar. It kind of feels fitting for a Friday in July to just kick back and talk information security in a casual way with some lemonade. Don't you think? Don't you think, Joe?
If that's what's in your glass, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Uh, but today specifically, we're going to cover business continuity and disaster recovery planning. This is something that every business needs, and few have. And we're going to try to help kind of break it down to the basics, provide some free resources, and hopefully encourage you to just get started. For those of you who are new to our monthly webinars, my name is Jordan Darling, and today I'm your main presenter, although we're just going to kind of shoot the breeze here. I'm a certified information system security professional, vice president of Top Dog PC, and CEO of High Tech Secure. And I'm here, as always, with Joe Malmberg. Joe is the owner and president of Top Dog PC, the CTO of High Tech Secure, and the holder of SANS GIAC Security Essential Certification. Joe and I, we've been in business for over 16 years, small business owners, information technology, and information security. So I hope that you guys can really glean some valuable insights from us and our experience. And that's really the purpose of these webinars. So how's your week been going, Joe?
Oh, it's been good, and I think that this is a really good topic just because I think if you ask a lot of business owners, do you have a disaster recovery plan or do you have a business continuity plan? You might get shrugs, or you might get, yeah, I've got one, but I think that I guess it's a good conversation, because even if they think they have one, they actually might not. They might have something that resembles, a disaster recovery plan, but maybe not a business continuity plan. And I think this is going to be good. So yeah, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, or they assume that their IT company already has one, but
That's also a great assumption.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they haven't talked it through, and it helps to be on the same page. This is a kind of a business decision type of a thing, and so it's up to the business to make that decision.
That's right.
So you should sit down with your IT firm for sure, but you need to be a part of it. So what we'll cover today, we're just going to talk about what a business continuity and disaster recovery plan are, why you should have one, what are the elements included in those, or at least we're going to focus on business continuity, and we'll kind of talk about what the differences are, and then just how to start, where to start, because at the end of the day, I don't want to flood you with information that just leaves you overwhelmed. I want to encourage you to get started and show you where to go. So the most interesting slide in the deck is terminology. But I thought it was important to just get on the same page as to what these mean, because there is an issue in the industry that people aren't always speaking the same language. So what I define as a business continuity plan might not be what other people define it as, and that's just we can't solve that problem today, but we can kind of at least start at a baseline of what we're talking about in this presentation. And these terms come from the CISSP training, so they're pretty widely accepted, but again, some people think differently. So some of the key terms: business continuity plan, BCP is what it's often referred to, is a long-term plan to ensure the continuity of business operations. Disaster recovery plan, or a DRP, is a short-term plan to recover from a specific disruptive event. And then a business resumption plan, which we're not really going to cover, but it's kind of a part of all this, is kind of a plan that details the steps required to restore normal business operations after recovering from a disruptive event. So the event happened, you figured out how to stay in business during it. Now, what are the steps to bring you back up to 100%?
Is it safe to say that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but is a disaster recovery plan and business resumption plan, are those components of a business continuity plan?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. All right. So
yeah.
the
So
BCP is kind of the overarching plan that contains all these other subcomponents.
yeah, yeah, correct. So it's kind of an umbrella. The business continuity plan is going to be more strategic. It's kind of the long-term plan. It's focused on, um, the overarching goal of how to continue to operate before, um, during, and after a disaster is experienced, or some sort of a disruptive event is experienced. Um, and so it's more strategic. It's kind of long-term planning. It's business focused. So it's looking at the business as a whole. What are the key pieces for the business's mission? And so that includes uh, multiple specific plans as a part of that. So it'll kind of direct which plan to execute at which point in time, which would include a disaster recovery plan. So that being said, then the disaster recovery plan is more tactical. It's kind of a short-term plan dealing with a specific disruption, like mitigating a malware infection. So a malware infection happens, the business continuity plan gets executed, and that the business continuity plan will kind of guide you as to which disaster recovery plan needs to happen in order to deal with that situation.
And Jordan, I've
Mhm.
seen some disaster recovery plans, and I've helped implement them. And I think one thing about them, and that's probably true with both a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan, is that they can be as they can be very general, they can be very specific.
Mhm.
I think that the ones that are more specific are probably more successful. Like, for example, the ones that I saw, even like in a disaster recovery plan, that might be focused on like a particular system, is here's a list of things that you're going to be doing one by one. Like, you're going to enter this command, you're going to enter this command, you're going to wait for response. And the reason that they do that is, in a disaster, when something's going wrong with one of the systems that you rely on to run your business, chances are that as the person that's trying to fix it, you're probably getting peppered with questions from everybody saying, hey, when is this going to be back up? When is this going to be back up? What do we do now? What's going on? And if you can't focus on the task at hand, you're not going to be successful getting back up. So being specific and having those very line by line things, that tasks that you need to do, people you need to get in touch with, I think the more refined that is, the more successful it can be. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing the first time that I ever was exposed to a disaster recovery plan, how specific it can be.
Yeah, for sure. Because in that moment, it's hard to make great decisions with all that chaos going on. So having something that just guides you step by step, for the business owner, I mean, that helps you sleep at night, right? To know
Hmm.
that if something happens, you have a thing you can follow, and you just know you've pre-thought it out. You know the steps. You even maybe know how long each step takes. So you kind of have an idea ahead of time. Okay, no matter what event's happening, I kind of know how long this is going to take. We've discussed this and we put things in place to deal with it. Um, and the other thing is that, based on what you said there, if you kind of take a step back too, the business continuity plan, like you were mentioning, someone always like asking for updates, and that can be kind of, this guy has to focus on the task, and it's hard when you're getting interrupted. So the business continuity plan might identify uh, the roles of people in different events. So it'll identify, okay, this is the disaster recovery plan that you need to execute. That disaster recovery plan might say, okay, so this is the person responsible for executing this plan. The business continuity plan might identify then who is the one who's going to be communicating updates, and then that way, right off the bat, that the person who's actually getting the systems back up and running isn't the one getting bothered for updates, or at least he's maybe getting bothered by this other guy that's identified in the business continuity plan. But it just makes things go smoother. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? It's just a plan that helps things go smooth in the midst of chaos. So yeah, so business disaster recovery plan is more of an immediate response for a specific event. It's not really long-term focused, but it's system centric. So whatever that system is, and here's kind of a graphic from the NIST SP 800-34 that deals with continuity planning. That kind of helps you understand what's going on. There's just multiple moving parts when there's an incident, and you kind of start by addressing the business continuity plan to see what guidance you have on which disaster recovery plan to execute. So the business continuity plan is going to be focused more on things like the people, vital records, processes that need to be recovered in addition to critical systems. So an example of that, I guess, that I'd bring up is email. So if there's an event that's impacting multiple systems, including email, many people might consider email a critical piece of business or a business critical
Absolutely.
system. But there are also some people that might say, okay, even though it might be painful to be without email, there are other systems or other ways to communicate that allow us to quickly continue business processes and continue delivering services that are more vital than just having email backup. And so the business continuity plan will identify that, so that you're not focusing first on email if it's really not the most important piece that's going to impact service delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so the business continuity plan will also kind of help guide, and we'll talk a little bit about this this idea, but it'll cover considerations like what's the maximum tolerable downtime. So why should you have a BCDR plan? The main reason is because disasters and disruptive events are inevitable fact of life. If you're in business long enough, it will happen. You'll experience something. And so oftentimes what's connected to when you say disaster recovery, everyone just thinks first and foremost about a natural disaster or
Right.
something like that. And then it often makes them feel like, oh, well, it's not super important because we all know that those are maybe less likely to happen. And depending on where you are, maybe some of them are pretty likely to happen.
Yeah.
Hurricanes, tornadoes.
I mean, I'd say that of the things that are on this list that I've experienced,
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be the malware issue and the equipment failure.
Yeah.
Those are probably the two that I'm seeing the most. Or equipment failure could cover a lot of different things, whether it's server or firewall or loss of internet. I have heard about I heard about there was a company in New York City that I think you were talking with this gentleman too, and he had just sold a backup product to a customer, and like that that weekend, the building next door was having some work done on it, and a wrecking ball hit the wall where their server was located, and then it made a small hole in the wall, and it snowed. Snow came in over the weekend and destroyed their server, but they fortunately had offsite backup. But I mean, that's kind of a weird one. But flooding happens, and it's not because the Mississippi's flooding. It's because your sump pump wasn't working, and it rained, or somebody left left water running, or it was fresh water. So all those things. It's important to have a plan to deal with them.
Yeah, I remember early on in my career supporting a company, and and this is probably when I first started realizing that a disaster recovery plan is pretty important,
Hmm.
because I was kind of a one man shop at the time, and so I would get the call if there was an outage. I mean, I would get the call, and so it impacted my life. If one of my clients was down, I'd get the 2 o'clock in the morning call and uh, and stuff. So, but but the I remember thinking, okay, I don't have anything in place. I don't know, I'm always just kind of responding, and then having to figure out what to do in the moment. And uh, and I remember whenever there would be like tornado warnings, I would immediately have a sinking feeling in my stomach, thinking, I hope, I know it's not likely that a tornado is going to actually like cause a problem, but I all of a sudden started realizing, oh yeah, we don't have anything in place that will help if there was an issue. So
Hmm.
when you have these things thought through and planned, then you remove those sinking feelings,
Right.
and you can sleep better at night. But so when you're building a business continuity plan, you're going to want to think about all these things, make a list of the different things, and actually, rate them. What is the likelihood? Uh, so these are all considered threats. When you're kind of trying to identify what your risks are, these are threats. So when you look at your threats, you then identify, well, what's the likelihood of them happening, and then you determine from there what the impact if it did. So then you're looking at it kind of holistically,
Hmm.
and you can identify what are your major threats, uh, and what are the more impactful threats, and make decisions according to that.
And obviously, part of this decision-making process is defining. I think you touched on this already. Is defining those things that are important, most important. Like you said, like email. All right, let's define what are the 10 things we need to make sure that we can conduct business.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when you're thinking about the elements then of a BCDR plan, there's a variety of resources that can help you along the way. A lot of free resources. Um, there's also a variety of schools of thought on what should be a part of these plans. Um, and so we're going to get into kind of, I think, what would be our suggestion of the basics of them. But here are some free resources just so you guys know. NIST has a lot of different publications that deal with information security and try to help guide the public, and of course internally government systems on how to approach these things. And so NIST SP 800-34 is the one that covers business
Got a nice
continuity.
ring to
Yeah,
it.
it isn't. I love all these. And then the Department of Homeland Security also, I discovered this has a business continuity plan generator. They also have a disaster recovery plan generator. So, if you kind of like it, when you think about starting this process and you think, I wish I could just kind of, I wish there was just some sort of app that could just make it happen. They have it. It's pretty basic. It's not uh, the most technologically advanced, but it does guide you through
It's a great starting
building.
point, right?
It's a
I
great
mean,
starting point.
if you don't have anything yet, I mean, you can end up with something that is, it resembles a backup or business continuity disaster recovery plan. So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I'd urge anybody that wants to at least dip their toe in it to maybe start there. But I'll let you continue with your list of things that you think are most important when you're building that.
Well, yeah, and what I'm thinking is that's good, but it's not easy. Like just because it's called a generator does not make it easy to go through. You're not going
Right.
to get through it in 30 minutes, you know. So my thought is keep it simple. Anything's better than nothing. So starting this process, uh, you know, just start somewhere and get something written down uh, that identifies one thing that you might need to do. Um, but the generator is a nice way to kind of walk through it. Um, so let's look at, so here's what I would say is kind of the basic elements of a business continuity plan. This is something you'll see pretty much everywhere. So the business impact analysis, its main purpose is to kind of determine the maximum tolerable downtime. But that's going to be just about everywhere that you find some resources. It's going to want you to go through a business impact analysis. This would be including parts of the business impact analysis is making sure you have a risk assessment, an information resource asset classification. So what, classify each piece, each resource you have that you're using, each system, classify it, understand what how critical it is to your business, and then and then and then identify potential disruptions to those systems.
So this is where you say, all right, email is important to my business. Our line of business application is critical.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
and you identify, you can even put dollar amounts. How monetarily impactful is if that was down, you know?
yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, because some of this is going to inform some other parts of your backup plan too that is a little farther down there. Like I think it's important to calculate what is an hour of what is 10 minutes of downtime cost us, and how far back can we afford to go? What's the farthest amount of data that we can afford to lose and still be profitable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so if you remember, like, so the business continuity plan is going to be focused on the business's mission. So you're when you're going through this process for that, you're going to think what you're going to identify each piece of critical, each resource and what it's uh, what it does for the business, what process it helps you deliver, and then figure out how long can that system be down, how much money will I lose while it's down, and how long can it be down before we're all really looking at being out of business,
Mm-hmm.
So maximum tolerable downtime, how long can you tolerate that system being down? And then a classification system, you need some sort of a system to identify those critical systems and what records are most essential. Mitigation strategies and safeguards to avoid disasters. So safeguards should include like protective measures such as redundancy, fire suppression, uninterruptible power supplies. Just create what you can do, put together what you can do to prevent disasters from happening or from impacting certain systems. And you want to make sure you make a list of that. Backups and offsite storage. Identify what you're doing there. Information resource role in business resumption. So this is talking specifically about getting the business back to 100%. So it's the same as kind of classifying a system, but make sure you identify what the role is when trying to get your business completely back to 100%. Also include in their contingency plans for different types of disruptions to systems. And so this is where kind of the disaster recovery comes into play. What are contingency plans for each specific type of disruption or system? And then also identifying organizational responsibilities for implementing the disaster recovery plans. So this is identifying people. This is kind of the people part of it. who's responsible for what. When if a certain system's down, who is supposed to call who, and what teams are supposed to be included, and at what point in time do they get included?
So well, I want to. I just something just occurred to me here.
Yeah,
As we're going through this, and you're identifying systems that are critical. Are is another part of this? We're talking technology with some of this, but there's also people too. Like, right? What if
yeah,
a person is gone? Like, that's also part of this too, right? When you're building these out.
100%. Yeah,
Okay.
business continuity. So you're going to be identifying. You're going to fill out. And you know what? I don't think I mentioned that up there, but if you go through the generator, you will see there's and I guess I included it down there, but there's a checklist. So you start with a checklist. It's actually on the next slide, so I'll mention that when we get there. But yeah, so people, 100%, you got to think through all the pieces of it, and the business continuity plan is what kind of brings that together, because it's not system, it's process, it's function, it's person that performs a role. Procedures for reporting incidents. So identifying when you're supposed to report something, who do you report it to, implementing the procedures for implementing a disaster recovery plan, and when do you escalate to. So if someone's there working on it and you're running into problems, what's the plan to when you need to bring in other people, and move that up the chain. Also, what's your strategy for having multiple site storage for backup documents? With that, that's really when that's talking about backup documents. It's talking about pieces of the plan. Like making sure that when you're trying to execute this recovery plan, that there's multiple places that people can access those lists. So like I'm trying to think of an example. So like one of the things when you go through the checklist for preparing yourself to start building a business continuity plan, it's going to identify, okay, make sure you have all the names and contact information for all these different pieces of your business, vendors that you might need to contact, and it really gets you to think outside of the box, to make sure you have that information available for things that you might not even be thinking about. You don't know. Do you know your local police department's phone number? Are you going to have to scramble around to try to get that if you need it? So making sure you have, the documents in multiple places.
Yeah, that's really important. If your systems are down, this is where this is where the printed paper can come into play.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I do think that it's important to have a printed copy somewhere, in multiple places, but also accessible on the network. And then the last two pieces are also really crucial, which is, once you have this plan in place, once you create this plan, you don't just put it on the shelf.
Everybody runs through this thing and does it. It's
Like,
no,
oh,
you're
I
right
got it
though.
now. I got it now. It's saved in a folder somewhere.
Yep. Yep. I would say that's just probably one of the things that is the least followed up on step in there,
Yeah.
because you're supposed to run through it on a regular basis, and I guess that's the annual review and revision as well too, right?
Yeah.
Make sure it's still relevant, and then actually perform a dry run of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So training, making sure that you train it out to people so that they are comfortable going through it, because it's one thing to have it, and then like all of a sudden a disruptive event occurs, and if they don't know, or they've never walked through the process or knew what to do, then it's still going to be chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, the business continuity plan is here, go look at it. And if it's just all new to them, they haven't walked through it, like it's not going to be very helpful. So training people on it, testing, trying to improve it, discussing when you go through an event, making sure you kind of review, okay, what went right, what went wrong, how could we have done this better, and
Hmm.
improving it. And yeah, like you mentioned, every year, make sure you read through it again, make sure everything's up to date,
Yeah, it's
revise
not
it as
uncommon to add new systems every single year that
oh,
suddenly become critical.
all right, which leads me then to, okay, all that said and done, um, where should we really start? And that's where I kind of want to leave this, leave you guys with, because it's going to take work, but I don't want to discourage you from starting on it.
Hmm.
Um, and so one of the things that I would say is, perhaps take a look at the Department of Homeland Security's business continuity plan generator, and at least look at the checklist, because the checklist will at least help you understand what information I should maybe start gathering.
Hmm.
Because you could kind of get stuck and then not return to this whole process if all of a sudden you sit in a room thinking you're going to build this plan, and then you realize you don't have all the information you need,
Right.
and then it's kind of like, okay, let's go
I'll deal with
find
this
it.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and absolutely make sure that, when you look at that thing, the things that you're going to need to collect, um, before you, maybe even before you start working on it, consider the people that you're going to need to get those things completed and bring them in, to help you flesh it out. And I think I'm really happy you pointed out that DHS one, because the DHS one and the NIST. I mean, these are our tax dollars at work. It's free resources, or these resources are available to us as business owners for free. And it's pretty incredible that, if somebody were to go, if you go to an organization to have one of these built for you, you can be looking at, tens of thousands of dollars to do this. Now, I don't know, this is something that we'll also help with too, and it might not cost tens of thousands of dollars, but it's important, I think, it's important to have something. Not everybody's got the budget to build one of these out, um, but they make it affordable. It's really just a lot of it's time commitment.
Hmm. Yeah, certainly. And again, I think it's important that you just get one in place, and then you start the review process. Then you can start tweaking it as you go, but to kind of at least start somewhere is great. And when you go through, so if you do go through the DHS generator, one of the first things also that I think is maybe important, ahead of time, is to make sure you have a policy first, and a policy, just because the plan is going to help, is what you're going, the procedures and items that you're going to execute, but it's kind of driven by the policy, and it just kind of takes you a step back to think about what your approach is going to be, make sure everyone understands it, um, and so it'll talk about like how you actually define business continuity. I provided a definition of business continuity today, uh, but maybe you want to just identify that in your policy. This is how we view business continuity for us. Um, so identify that, and then identify who's actually responsible for overseeing this. It's one of those things where we've heard it before. If everyone's accountable, then no one's accountable. So just decide who is that accountable person to get the pieces moving, and then maybe figure out what your budget's going to be towards it, because once you know what your budget's going to be, that's going to either limit, or it's going to limit what you can do, how you
Hmm.
can plan it. And another kind of plug for the BCP generator, from the DHS. Too many
Acronyms there,
acronyms.
yeah.
So the DHS BCP generator is, one nice thing is that when you go to each step, it gives you sample text. So when it gets to like the hey, what's your business continuity plan or your business continuity policy? If you don't even have one, you can take a look at their sample text and it might kind of guide you through, okay, well, I can take these bones and I can make it my own, but it'll help guide you on some of those things that you don't already have. So that's kind of a nice piece of it. Then sit down and talk about your assumptions and your objectives. And this is where you start talking as a business about when you're building this plan, what are we assuming is already done? And then also getting into what your goals and your objectives are. So it's going to focus on what's the scope of this business continuity plan. What kind of events is it going to cover? What's my recover point and recover time objectives? This is where you decide these are our objectives for this plan. What
Mm-hmm.
are the real numbers? How long are we going to be down?
Mm-hmm.
What's our goal there? So if it's 72 hours is our maximum tolerable downtime, that's what you start by identifying those ahead of time. And then we've said it before, risk assessment. Make sure, so I would recommend doing a full-blown risk assessment. That's really where everything starts, in my opinion. Is you don't know even what to do if you don't know what you have. You haven't identified what your risks are. A full-blown risk assessment, information security risk assessment, I think is something that every business needs. Now that's something that does cost some money, and if you're going to do a full one, and it is something that we can help you with. We can guide you. There's some free resources, but I would have a third party come in and help with one of those. But for those who are saying, I want to get started, but I'm not ready to pay for a full third party risk assessment, again, that generator, it has a place where you will look at all of those threats and you'll walk through on your own what you think the risk is. And so you'll think what the likelihood of each one is and you'll score it. You'll think what's the impact of this event and you'll score it. And so then you can just kind of walk through that yourself for the sake of this plan, but it'll be just you kind of deciding those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it can't be overstated the value that you get in a risk assessment when it's through the lens of an information security professional who's gone through that training and is going to think about think about how things connect in your business, that it might not be, you may just take for granted. So having that person from the outside look at it really adds a lot of value to it. I mean, and this is coming from somebody who's been in IT for however many years I've been doing this now. But we work with auditors. And this is all they do. And they come up with some very, very good points, very good analysis, and they definitely look at things from a different perspective than you do when you're living your life in the business every single day.
Yeah. And that brings up something that I didn't even mention back, but the business continuity plan is going to cover, that's where you identify what are your regulatory requirements too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to drive what needs to happen as
Right.
well. So, and then finally, I think the next piece, so, and again, this slide is kind of, I guess, us recommending, here's your first few steps along the way. So then for sure, the business impact analysis is something that you're going to want to start. So before you actually go through everything, the whole business continuity planning process as a whole, maybe just start with this. So in a business impact analysis, there's really 3 steps. It's going to be determining what the mission critical or business critical processes are and what the recovery requirements are for those. You're going to identify resource requirements, who, what, systems, systems and people, like what is required for that that
to get
event.
to get things back to a point where they're usable again, basically.
And then identify recovery priorities for system and business resources. So again, and business impact analysis, I mean, we don't have to overcomplicate it. It is what it is. You're going to determine an event, identify an event threat, and what its impact is going to be to your business.
So Jordan, if somebody has gone through this whole webinar and they are saying to themselves, well, I want to get started on this, great DHS thing's interesting, I've looked at it, but I'm overwhelmed. What would you recommend that they do? Who would you recommend that they reach out to?
I would recommend they reach out to me. That's what I would recommend. I would recommend that they reach out. Even, hey, I'm a believer in making sure that we help people just run their business more securely. You and I have talked about this so many times. We are truly passionate about small businesses, and small businesses are the backbone of our nation, and we need just as much. We need technology just as much as the big guys. We need to be operating securely just as much as the big guys, and so there's a lot that we'd be able to help out with just to answer some questions. Certainly this does get a little overwhelming, and so there are lots of things we can take off people's plates and guide them through. But even just questions, start by contacting us or someone else that you trust, and then
Right.
look at this generator. It really will. I think that if you do want to use this generator, what will happen is you'll start with the checklist, and then you'll start going through it. You probably will get stuck, or you'll start realizing that, oh, I can't do this in my 15-minute break, or something like that. It's going to be, you're going to want to set aside some time to make sure you're putting the right amount of.
And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can send me a postcard. No, no, they can call us. Do we have? I don't even have our number.
Okay, well, it's up on our website, topdogbc.com.
And
ask for the big guy, the big CISSP, Jordan.
So this, I feel like this wasn't as casual as I was thinking it would be.
Yeah,
but that's fine. Pretty structured.
Well, we got when you got a PowerPoint presentation, it's going to be some structure. So
PowerPoint.
Yeah, well, this is good though. This is great information. Hopefully it wasn't too dry, and hopefully everybody stuck around. And it looks like we got another one coming up here in a month.
Yep, monthly webinars.
Determined. All right. Well, thank you everybody for if you've stuck around this long. I appreciate it, and hope you got something out of this.
Yeah, let me know how we can help you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.